I'm wondering, is there an alternative, a proper alternative to propaganda in such a way? But before we are going to answer these questions, I don't think we'll find the answer to every question we'll be posing tonight, but we can explore it. Olaf, my introduction of you is the most romantic tonight, because we met a year ago on a very sultry, warm evening in the very historic center of Baku in an open-air restaurant, Azerbaijan. Well, there it stopped. But you told me you were a Moscow-based correspondent. Who do you work for?
I'm a freelancer, so I work for a lot of different organizations, but I mostly work for RTL. It's the second biggest broadcaster in the country. And I've been in Moscow for around 6 years nearly. I lost count because it's been a while already. I started off as a freelancer with not much work to do.
No.
And towards it developed in a way, and I work for RTL for now 2.5 years, I think.
And we're discussing tonight Russian media. Is there something about Russia we don't know, but we should know regarding this evening?
There's a lot of things you probably nobody knows and everybody should know. What I like to tell, otherwise, I mean, what I have to do in my reporting is I always have to explain how bad things are, and things have gotten from bad to worse in the past years. It's a very depressive thing to see.
Have you seen it?
Of course, I've seen this happen firsthand ever since. Oh, there's a small adjustment. I've seen this happen firsthand, of course, ever since Putin was re-elected, which is a year ago. There we go. Ever since Putin was re-elected
Just continue.
A year ago.
I think we can hear you.
There have been enormous changes in Russian society. But on the other hand, Russia is still Russia. There are still 143 million Russians who live their lives. Moscow is one of the most fun capitals in the world. Life there is pretty cool and pretty amazing. If you sometimes look past all the politics.
And then again, do you understand why Mr. Putin is has a success as a leader?
There are a lot of reasons. Is it understandable? Sure.
Why?
Russia, I like to say often, and it's very true, things are going very bad in Russia, but it has never been so good. The standard of life has been going up really drastically for the past
For everyone?
Years. For most people. There's a large number of people who have considerably better lives in the past 10 years. And if you want to blame that on somebody, you can blame it on Putin. You can also thank him in a way for that. It doesn't give him, it's not an excuse, and it's not a reason to be happy with the man. But there is some, it's understandable at least.
And is there something like a Putin method or a technique?
Stamp out all the opposition. Of course, there is a Putin technique. It's a very complicated political system. A political system I, after 6 years, still don't completely understand. You create an opposition. You create splits in the opposition. You make sure the splits argue with other parts of the opposition. Basically, in a way, you take over the whole of society in a kleptocratic way. Because let's not forget, if we only talk about press freedom, also Russia is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. There's been so much money stolen. So I mean, there's definitely a way, and it's very complicated, but you can see it growing.
And media-wise, what's his technique?
Basically, his main instrument is television, like any dictator, I think. Most television channels in Russia are completely under the control of the government. They actually, there's, some of them are great journalists, but I've seen editorial offices where there is a phone, a special phone on a separate table, and sometimes it rings, and they have to answer the phone, and they tell you, now you have to make a story about this. And they do it, and of course, television is the main instrument.
But this is the age of the internet? And exactly. As in Europe, in Russia, it will grow and grow.
It is growing. I mean, Russia is currently the biggest internet market in Europe. It's bigger than the internet market in Germany. The internet is still growing 20% per year. And what you see is that because the traditional media is very much under pressure by the authorities, you see that a lot of journalism automatically goes online. For us, it's a process that came slowly and gradually, and it's a process we have to adapt to. But in Russia, it's quite necessary. If you want independent information, you have to go online. And that's amazing. I mean, there are so many great online initiatives. There's different publications that have, in some cases, over 100 journalists working for their online publication. It's something we in the Netherlands, we can't even imagine. We have a couple of online platforms, and they're not all that good.
And so the internet, is that equals freedom?
I know. I don't think the internet can ever be a substitute for freedom. Freedom is something more, even for our generation, maybe, notwithstanding how much we are in the internet, how much the internet is surrounding us. There's still, I mean, freedom of posting things on Facebook is not the same as the freedom you have outside.
No, but creating your own platform, that sounds like a free spot.
Of course, there is there's an online version of freedom, but it's not an alternative for real freedom.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. In short, can you describe the media landscape in Russia? Who are the big shots, the big players? And
I mean, again, I think the most important thing is state television. That's massive. Don't forget that when we talk about Russia, we usually talk about Moscow, St. Petersburg, and a couple of all smaller cities we've heard of, and then it gets very complicated. But most Russians live outside of the little
big
Moscow
cities, yeah.
and St. Petersburg bubble, and they live in a country where, of course, and they live in parts of the country where it's very hard to, you know, if you have, most of them have television, some of them don't even. And I mean, then your life is completely dominated by state.
So there's state television, and then a whole lot of big gap, and then there's some online platforms.
No, there's state television, then there are newspapers. There are a couple of independent newspapers. There are a lot of not independent newspapers. There's a whole bunch of bullshit in the yellow press, which is an enormous gap going from the Russian version of Playboy to other magazines which are actually quite good. And then, of course, there is the online media, which in Russia, as I said, is much more developed and much more interesting than it is here.
Okay.
I wake up, like, even when I'm in Amsterdam, in the morning I go and check these Russian news sites because I want to know what's happening anyhow, even if I'm not working, like on the day as today. Whereas frankly, I never have any moment that in the Netherlands I want to see what's happening on a certain online platform because there's not that much happening, and that's strange.
Okay, so we can learn something from them.
Most definitely.
Okay.
And I think the most important thing is a dialogue in whatever you do. And I mean, of course, I have to be quite harsh sometimes because I have to be honest. I have to be very harsh in my reporting from Russia. But in all cases, there's nothing more important than the dialogue.
The dialogue. We talk about that later. But let's have a look. There's a little movie about your colleagues talking, the Russian journalist talking about what's happening in Russia. Well, there was a little movie about... Yes.
I think that the situation with the human rights is getting worse every year.
Sometimes I'm an optimist, sometimes I think that we will have a Soviet Union here in a week.
Yes, I think Russia is not going into the direction of democracy for many years already. It's not very new.
Rusland is nooit een paradijs geweest voor journalisten. Er zijn hier altijd journalisten bedreigd, lastiggevallen, vermoord in heel veel gevallen. Dat is onder Poetin niet beter geworden, maar het is ook niet erg verslechterd.
We had several laws adopted by Russian parliament, laws on NGO's, laws on the manifestations and rallies. Laws on so-called international agents or something like that. And of course we see that the situation is becoming worse.
Ja, wat wel schrikbarend is het tempo waarin het gaat. Die wetten worden in rap tempo door de Duma allemaal gestempeld en aangenomen. Dat gaat ineens wel heel snel. Het gaat heel ver en heel snel.
On the 6th of May, during the rally here in Moscow, I was arrested for 20 minutes because I was arrested with my press card in my hand. Then I make a big story, and they let me go in 20 minutes. But 20 minutes with my press card, I was in a police track, which is not normal.
Last 10 or 12 years were like in a scary movie. Really.
Russia was a young democracy at the beginning of the 90s.
Rusland natuurlijk vroeger werd gezien als een jonge democratie. En dat is nu voorbij. Rusland is zeker niet een jonge democratie meer. Dat weten wij inmiddels ook in Nederland.
People maybe weren't ready to democracy after Soviet Union. So they were very happy to before Vladimir Putin, and now it is a authoritarian state which is going to be a dictator state.
How can we stay quiet about it? Why? It's very terrible.
Yeah, the Russian media professionals. Let's invite one more and give him a round of applause. It's Oleg Kashin, who has seen Putin's kids.